I never imagined my life would split into before and after a single July morning. For most of our marriage, I believed Emily and I were solid. Maybe not perfect, but stable, warm, predictable. The kind of couple that shared grocery lists and inside jokes. The kind that held hands unconsciously while walking across parking lots. We weren't dramatic. We weren't reckless. Or at least, I wasn't. Emily left for her business trip on July 21st. The date is burned in my memory now, but back then it felt routine. She worked for a marketing firm in another state, and business trips were nothing new. She hugged me before getting in her car, cheerful and excited like she always was before traveling. Her brown hair shimmered in the sun, and she laughed at something small I said, something I can't remember anymore. It was the last time her laughter felt innocent. She texted me an hour after departure. On the way, traffic's light today. Then another, hotel seems nice. I'll send pics later, yellow heart. Everything seemed normal. Completely, painfully normal. A few hours later, she began sending me photos, pictures of fancy restaurant dishes, a view from her 17th floor hotel room, a smiling selfie in the elevator. I told her to enjoy it, to relax, to make the most of her meetings. She responded with heart emojis. And for that one evening, I didn't suspect anything at all. The night we talked briefly. She told me about the clients she met, how exhausting the schedule was, how she might turn early. Her voice sounded slightly distant, but I attributed it to stress. She often grew quieter during work trips. I thought nothing of it. When I picked her up at the airport 3 days later, she seemed distracted. Not nervous, not sad, just unfocused, like her mind kept drifting away from the conversation. I asked her if she had slept on the plane, and she nodded with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. But again, I brushed it off. I trusted her. I always trusted her. We had dinner plans that night, my stepfather's birthday. Emily insisted she was fine, that she wanted to go, and during the dinner, she looked almost normal. Calm, even content. If something was wrong, I thought she would tell me later. That's how our marriage had always worked. But a few days after the trip, she texted me while I was at work. I think I might have a yeast infection. I teased her about it, lighthearted, like any husband might. You sure it's not an STD? Faced with tears of joy, her reaction came instantly. Why would you say that? That's not funny. Her tone was sharp, defensive in a way I didn't expect. I asked if she was okay, and she told me she'd pick up medication and that everything was fine. But it didn't feel fine. Something tightened in my chest, a quiet warning I didn't know how to interpret. The next day, she told me her symptoms were worse, and she had scheduled an appointment with her doctor. I offered to go with her, but she refused, saying it was routine. A few hours later, she messaged again. Doctor says it's a yeast infection and bacterial vaginosis. Got meds. I didn't know then that her story was crumbling. Not yet, but something told me she wasn't being honest. The way she avoided eye contact, the way her explanations grew shorter, the strange new sadness in her voice. That night after her appointment, she sat at the edge of the bed and cried. Silent tears. I asked what was wrong, and she said she felt overwhelmed, work stress, personal worries, everything mixed together. She told me she might need to see a therapist soon. She said she felt like something inside her was breaking. I held her while she cried, confused but supportive. But deep down, I felt the storm coming. 2 days later, it hit. Emily broke down completely. I found her sitting in the kitchen, face in her hands, shaking. When I asked what was going on, she whispered, I need to tell you something I should have told you sooner. Her voice was hollow, empty. I wasn't honest about the trip, she said. I met someone. I didn't plan it. It just happened. Time stopped. Literally. I felt like the floor beneath me shifted. She explained everything in fragments. How she met a businessman at the hotel bar on her second night. How one drink turned into three. How he flirted and she flirted back. How she felt powerful and wanted, emotion she apparently hadn't felt in a long time. How she followed him to a quiet corner, then to the elevator, then up to his room. She said she was drunk. She said she didn't think clearly. She said she hated herself afterward. But none of her excuses mattered. Not when she admitted the worst. We didn't use protection. I'm so sorry, Daniel. I don't know what I was thinking. I stared at her like she was a stranger. She said she came back the next morning, terrified and guilty, and spent the whole trip home trying to figure out how to tell me. She said she hoped the infections were just coincidence, that maybe it wasn't what she feared. But the truth was obvious. She had brought the man's disease home to me. My silence scared her. She shook and sobbed harder, begging me to say something. Anything. But my mind was blank, split between disbelief and betrayal. I felt my heart beating so hard it hurt. Then anger took over. I told her to get out of my sight. I told her I couldn't stand to look at her. She tried to grab my hands, tried to make me listen, but I pulled away from her like she was poison. In some ways, she was. That night was the first time I slept on the couch, staring at the ceiling, feeling my chest burn with rage, humiliation, and a grief I couldn't begin to process. And the truth was only getting started. That night on the couch felt like an endless descent into darkness. I didn't sleep. I drifted in and out of shallow awareness, my mind replaying Emily's confession in a torturous loop. Every word she had said, every tear, every excuse pressed against my skull until I felt physically sick. Around 3 in the morning, I went to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. My face looked foreign. My eyes were hollow. I felt contaminated, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted more than anyone else in the world, had dragged something vile into our home, into our lives, into my body. The next few days were a blur. Emily walked around the house like a ghost, silent, trembling, terrified of my every movement. She tried to talk to me, but I shut her down with single-word answers. At one point, she tried to make breakfast, but her hands were shaking so violently she dropped a pan. She collapsed onto the kitchen floor, sobbing uncontrollably. But I couldn't comfort her. I couldn't even look at her without feeling sick. My chest felt tight constantly. Anger came in waves, sometimes quiet and cold, sometimes explosive. At work, I couldn't focus. My thoughts drifted so far that during a meeting, I forgot what conversation we were having. At one point, I felt dizzy, breathless. My vision blurred. My heart pounded erratically. My hands went numb. I was having a panic attack in the middle of the office. A coworker rushed me to a quiet room and called an on-site nurse. After 30 minutes of slow breathing and water, I calmed down enough to walk. I left work early and drove home mechanically, as if my body was moving on autopilot. That night, I told Emily I needed space. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse her again. I just said it flatly, like someone reading instructions from a piece of paper. She nodded, sobbing quietly, and slept in the guest room. The next morning, she tried to hand me a cup of coffee. I didn't take it. She whispered, "I'll fix this, Daniel. I swear I'll fix it. Just tell me what to do." But there was nothing she could do. She had shattered something that couldn't be repaired with apologies. Her guilt consumed her. She started going to therapy twice a week. Sometimes she would come home with red, swollen eyes and disappear into the shower for an hour. She wrote long letters to me, pages of begging, explanations, and promises, but I didn't read them. She left them on the kitchen counter, neatly stacked, each one signed with "I'm sorry. I love you." But love wasn't enough. Not anymore. We still lived together, but everything felt dead. We didn't touch, didn't laugh, didn't share meals. We were like two strangers performing the roles of a couple in a house filled with silence. And the silence was loud. One night she knocked on the living room door while I watched TV, even though the door was already open. She always knocked now. "Daniel," she said softly, I know you hate me. I know I hurt you in a way I can never undo. But please don't shut me out completely. I'm trying." I didn't respond. She stepped closer. "The therapist says that shame can destroy a person if they're alone with it. I know you need space, but I'm begging you, don't let me drown." Her voice cracked. Something inside me twisted, not sympathy, but a bitter, exhausted ache. She wanted comfort from the man she betrayed. She wanted me to save her from the consequences she created. I stood up and walked past her without a word. After I left the room, I heard her fall to the floor and cry. But I kept walking. Weeks passed like that, cold, punishing, suffocating. Emily tried every possible way to redeem herself. She cooked my favorite meals, left notes of encouragement, offered to attend couples therapy. She even suggested taking a break from work to focus on us. But how do you rebuild trust when your partner not only cheated, but brought a stranger's infection home? Every time I looked at her, I saw the hotel room, the bar, the elevator, the man, the bed. The moment she decided her vows were optional, I couldn't live like that anymore. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees outside our window, I finally said the word she had been dreading. I want a divorce. Emily froze mid-step, like someone had pressed pause on her body. Her lip trembled. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Daniel, no. Please, don't say that. We can fix this. I'll do anything. I love you. You don't get to love me now, I said. You threw it away. She felt her knees, clutching my leg, begging, sobbing, her voice breaking. Please don't leave me. I made a mistake, a horrible mistake. But I can be better. I can be different. Please don't end us. Please don't throw away our marriage. It's already gone, I said. And I meant it. Her face crumpled. She cried until her voice gave out, but I didn't waver. For the first time in weeks, I felt clarity, strength, purpose. I deserved better than a life spent wondering what lies looked like, how betrayal smelled, how guilt sounded. The next morning, we agreed to start the paperwork. Emily cried through the entire process, her hands shaking as she signed her name. I didn't. When the last signature dried, she whispered, I hope someday you can forgive me. But forgiveness wasn't my priority. Freedom was. The weeks after the divorce were unexpectedly peaceful. Painful, yes, but peaceful. My mind felt lighter, my chest less tight. I slept more, ate more, laughed occasionally with friends. I enjoyed silence again instead of drowning in it. I wasn't healed yet, but I was healing. Then one afternoon, while driving home from work, I saw a car pulled over on the side of the road with hazard lights on. A woman stood outside, staring hopelessly at a flat tire. Instinctively, I pulled over to help. That's how I met Nicole. She was warm, gentle, and disarmingly sincere. She smiled easily, even while frustrated. She thanked me repeatedly for helping. And something about her presence soothed me in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. We exchanged numbers just in case she needed help finding a decent repair shop. But she texted me later just to thank me one more time. Then another day to ask how my week was going. Then another to share a funny photo of her dog covered in mud. It was simple, innocent, natural. And for the first time since Emily's confession shattered my world, I felt hopeful. Nicole wasn't a replacement. She wasn't a cure. She wasn't a distraction. She was a reminder that kindness still existed. That trust wasn't always a trap. That some people knew how to care without destroying what they touched. Little by little, she brought color back into my life. She made me laugh again. She made me smile again. She made me feel human again. And slowly, quietly, something inside me began to rebuild itself. Something that Emily hadn't just broken. She had nearly annihilated. But I wasn't done healing yet. Not even close. Nicole entered my life quietly, like soft light bleeding into a dark room. There was nothing forced about her presence, nothing demanding or manipulative. She never pushed for explanations, never pried into my past. She just existed beside me, gently, patiently, as if she sensed that rushing anything would snap the fragile internal scaffolding I was rebuilding. We went for walks together. Slow ones, long ones. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. Sometimes we ended up sitting on park benches for an hour, watching ducks move aimlessly across the water. Nicole would point out little things, how the wind shifted, how the leaves sounded like paper when they rustled, how certain clouds looked like animals. No one had spoken to me like that in years. Not since before Emily changed. It wasn't romance. Not first. It was companionship, kindness, a reminder that human connection didn't have to be painful. But feelings grow in silence too. One evening, she invited me over to her place for dinner. It was nothing fancy, pasta, salad, a bottle of wine she didn't know how to open properly. I watched her struggle with the corkscrew and laugh for the first time in what felt like ages. A real laugh, not a polite smile, not a bitter scoff, a genuine burst of warmth from somewhere I thought was dead. She looked up at me, corkscrew still tangled in her hand, and said, "There it is." I knew you still had a real smile. I didn't know how to respond. My throat tightened, but not from sadness, from something gentler, something that scared me in a different way. Hope. The next few weeks with Nicole felt like being slowly rinsed clean after months of drowning in mud. She didn't fix me, but she made healing feel possible. Still, as good as things were becoming, shadows from my past lingered. Emily texted me twice after the divorce was finalized. Once, "I'm starting therapy again. I hope you're doing okay." Twice, "Daniel, you deserved better than what I did to you. I am sorry." I didn't respond, not out of cruelty, but because there was nothing left to say. My chapter with her had ended in a fire she lit herself, and I had no intention of stepping back into the smoke. But healing isn't linear, and trauma doesn't leave politely. Some nights, I still woke up sweating. I still heard the doctor telling Emily her test results. I still replayed the moment she admitted everything. I still felt the humiliation in my bones. Nicole noticed, of course. She always noticed. One night, after I woke suddenly from another nightmare, she sat up beside me and placed her hand over mine. "You don't have to talk about it," she whispered. "But I want you to know, whatever happened, it doesn't get to define the rest of your story." I swallowed, staring at the ceiling. "Sometimes I feel like it already has." "Then we write new chapters," she replied softly, slowly, carefully, together. Her words didn't erase the pain, but they gave it a place to rest. Months passed. Seasons changed. I found comfort in routine again. My job, my hobbies, my friendships. I repaired relationships I had neglected during the worst days of my marriage. My laugh returned more often. My voice grew steadier. My anxiety quieted. And Nicole became a constant presence. Warm, bright, grounding. One evening, as we drove home from a small weekend trip, she asked gently, "Do you ever think you'll fully trust someone again?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I think so." "Good," she said, smiling softly. "Because you deserve to." I looked at her, really looked, the kindness in her expression, the sincerity in her eyes, the way she never made me feel small or guilty or broken. And for the first time in almost a year, I believed that maybe I did deserve something better. Maybe I always had. The next major shift happened unexpectedly. It always does. I received an email from Emily's mother one morning. A short message. "Daniel, please know Emily is trying to get her life together. Thank you for being kind enough not to destroy her reputation publicly. I hope you're healing too. You were good to her. I'm sorry she didn't value that." I closed the laptop and sat silently for a long time. A strange feeling washed over me. Not anger, not sadness, not resentment. Just closure. Emily's actions were still unforgivable, but her story was no longer mine to carry. Whatever she did next, wherever she went, whomever she became, it had nothing to do with me anymore. I wasn't responsible for saving her, or punishing her, or fixing her mistakes. I was done, and that realization was the final piece of freedom I didn't know I was waiting for. Weeks later, Nicole and I sat outside on her porch during a soft spring rain. The air smelled like wet leaves and earth. She sipped her tea, then nudged me gently. "You look peaceful," she said. "I feel peaceful," I replied. She smiled. "Think you're ready for something new?" I turned to her, watching drops of rain hit the wooden railing. I said slowly, "I'm ready not to be afraid anymore." Nicole leaned her head on my shoulder. "That's enough," she whispered. "More than enough." Healing doesn't erase the past. It doesn't rewrite the betrayal or the pain or the sleepless nights. But it builds something new where the destruction used to be a foundation stronger than the one before it. Emily broke me, but she didn't end me. Her betrayal poisoned the life we shared, but it didn't stop me from finding something better, something healthier, something real. And as the rain continued to fall softly around us, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living again. And this time, I would build a life that no betrayal could destroy.